Welcome to the Trail Network podcast. I'm Leah Yingling, and this is
Hilary.
And this week we are joined by Lucy Bartholomew in Chamonix ahead of this week's UTMB. Lucy will be lining up at her second UTMB. She placed 10th here last year in the women's field in a really exciting race. In this episode, we get to chat with Lucy about her build up to UTMB, what she learned last year, her entire history and last 12 years in the sports, her recent coaching relationship with Jason Koop. We just hit it all. Lucy's just the best to chat with, gives us all the messages you really need to hear, and she's going to be a great follow this weekend. Excited to watch you out there, Lucy.
I'm cheering for you.
Welcome to the Trail Network podcast. We're here in person in Chamonix with one of our favorite runners lining up this week, this Friday night, Lucy Bartholomew. I'm Leah Yingling and here with Hilary Yang as well. Welcome, Lucy.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, we're so excited.
Oh, I am a stew of every emotion. I go through feeling excited and then feeling very anxious, very nervous, and very overwhelmed.
A little existential.
Yeah. It's kind of what kind of minute are you going to catch me on as to how I'm going to respond to a question.
Oh my gosh.
If I just like, break out in tears, no. But
Is that the taper tantrums or just the...
Just everything.
Yeah.
I feel like the lack of volume of running that usually helps process those kind of feelings is probably contributing to it all.
You're like, what are my coping mechanisms right now, right?
Yeah. Just sitting down, putting energy where I can control and just focusing on that.
Do you feel like you do have ways that you can divert your energy right now? Like, we'll talk about your training leading up to this as well, but like in this moment right now as you're prepping for the race, like what is going through your head and how are you kind of like letting your mind rest a little bit?
Yeah, and I think one of the best things for me has been to voice what I feel. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes, like, I'm not trying to, like, suppress emotions or be like, that's invalid, like, that's not true. I've got people around me that I'm kind of like, oh, this is how I feel right now. And they've been able to be like, well, like, that's totally normal. And this is how we can kind of, like, reframe that or, let's talk about it, let's get it out. And that's probably been my coping mechanism is just offload it to someone else. A shared problem, isn't it?
Well, I mean, that's what therapy's all about, so.
I'm not paying these people enough.
Nailed it.
I feed them. I cook for Ryan Sands, and that's his...
Perfect.
That's our trade.
Yeah. I mean, that's really nice that you do have that support of people like Ryan that you've known for so long. I feel like he's a very calming presence.
Yeah, and it's been cool because we went through this same... Like, we were in the same Valseny where the Solomon Training House was in the lead-up last year, and so we've gone through this process together, and so it's been cool to kind of be like a year on, we can't believe we're back, we're doing it again, and so much has changed, but nothing has changed. Mm-hmm. This race is a big deal, but it's also like not the end of the world. We realized after last year that life just goes on, come Sunday, come Monday.
It's so true.
He goes back to South Africa, I go back to Australia, and we'll probably end up back in Valseny in August next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that perspective, though, because I think, like, all the hype leading up to UTMB is just that. It's so much hype, and it's probably easy to get sucked into it. But, like you mentioned, like, our lives continue on next week. And, yeah, you might be top 10 at UTMB, you have those emotions, you have those feelings, but, like, you continue being Lucy Bartholomew and doing all the things that Lucy Bartholomew does. And I think that's a really cool perspective because, yeah, there's a lot of value in the sport, but also, like, a value in being a human in the sport too. And I think there's no one in our sport that represents that better than you. And I really do appreciate just how much of yourself you've shared with the world as you've literally grown in the sport. You've grown with the sport under the public's eye, and that's gotta feel like a lot sometimes. We were mentioning right before we started chatting here that you are probably one of the few people in the UTMB start line this year that also participated in YCC back in the day. So talk a little bit about your history here at UTMB and what it's meant really like growing with the sport and how that's evolved over the years.
Yeah, so the first time I came to UTMB was actually to watch my dad do it in 2015. And really special because, you get, I don't know, what's the cutoff for UTMB? Is it 38?
No, it's like 44.
6.5?
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah.
I'm going to say he took 44. So
that's sort of his MO, right? Like,
yeah. Luckily, he gave himself a little more breathing room on this race.
Yeah.
But I got to see and crew him through that race that was 2 days, and as however old I was then, just to watch someone and see that part of the field and how crazy this sport is and how gnarly this route is. And I think it really left me being like, I'm not ready for that. And I'm, obviously I wasn't old enough either. So I did YCC, and then I did OCC, and then I was signed up for CCC. And actually, it was actually on Billy Yang's podcast that I announced that I wasn't racing CCC because of, I just had no love for the sport. Like, I didn't want to be there. And it was one of the first times after starting some races and being like, why am I even starting if I'm not stoked and in love with this sport? It's disrespectful to the race, to the people, to my body.
Yeah.
And so I didn't start that year.
That's a hard truth to say.
It was really hard. And, I would have rather wrapped my leg in a bandage and said I had sprained my ankle, broken my leg, like put me on crutches. So
come in the sling.
Visually be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Whereas like trying to explain that you're mentally just not in it, it's really hard, and people kind of like struggle to understand it.
Like, you're an elite athlete, just push through. Like, this is your job. Yeah.
Like, this is your one day in the office. Like, get out there.
Yeah.
And then took a year away from it, and last year finally kind of was like, okay, I'm going to give it a crack. And it was really driven by like, can I do this, and the curiosity of it. But I always thought I would race UTMB twice, once to see it and once to race it. And so it's intimidating to come back and be like, now I'm in that next step where it's like, okay, I know I can do it, but like, how fast can I do this? And it's kind of a cool place to be, but it's also, I haven't lost that respect for what this course can and will dish up on Friday, Saturday, because these mountains, they take you to places that you don't know that you could endure and that you've never been.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man.
Yeah, I was reflecting a little bit on our post-UTMB chats last year, and I had this visualization of your ankle. I remember you had, your ankle was gigantic after the race last year, and it was a journey for you out there. You had a really great day, placing 10th in probably a little over 27 hours, was
27
it?
and a half, yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about that second time finishing the loop. What were some of the things that you did learn the first time out there? What were some of the ups and downs? Because, I can definitely relate that there's some good ups, but then the downs are
really down.
Oh, man. I mean, I feel like there was so few ups for me last year. And I say this, rose-colored glasses on the whole thing. I started and I had my period that
love that
starting the day before, and I just felt hot. I just felt heavy. The pace is fast to begin with. And the smartest and the biggest up and the biggest positive I took away was that I was smart enough in Les Houches when girls took that pace off the flat onto the climb. I went, nah, I can't do this. This is my 50K pace. I've never run this race. I'm respectful and fearful of what's to come. And if I feel bad now, I'm only going to feel worse if I go with them. And I saw Amanda Basham's red ponytail take off in the distance. And I took a minute, got my poles out, and, it really was the crowd, luckily, at that point and through Le Contamines and Saint-Gervais and Notre Dame de la Gorge really pushed me out the other side, and then I was in the mountains and alone. My option was to get to Italy.
No other choice.
No, I didn't fancy going backwards. So. Yeah. But then I kind of, as everything, you get used to a discomfort that you have, things start to kind of simmer away. But then my ankle came about, and I actually thought I had a stress fracture. I think in the Solomon house that word had been thrown around a bit, so it was kind of in the forefront of my brain, and my shin was just excruciating. And so, you're trying to make a smart decision in the heat of a very high emotional moment. And so I was just kind of walking and thinking about is this worth it? Should I do this? No, you shouldn't, da-da-da. Anyway, I had my coach, Jason Koop, look at my ankle, and he was like, no, I don't think it is. I think there's swelling. It's protected itself, but you're just going to have to do what you can with what you have. And, one of my biggest and favorite sayings is the two things you can always ever control is your energy and your attitude. And I was like, okay, instead of getting frustrated and upset about this, I'm going to be what can I do? And I'm going to put my effort into eating well, because I can do that, and just moving forward. And what I realized is that with my ankle, I could move uphill pretty swiftly, and the downhills I kind of had to crutch with the poles. And I think what I took away most from this race is, like, I thought I was going so slow.
Mm-hmm.
And then Iron Fire on the side of the road was like, welcome to the top 10. And I was like, what do you mean? And, you know, I hadn't passed any females, but they'd been at checkpoints, sat, and, you know, like, everyone had their own
Attrition was happening.
Attrition was happening.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, you know, obviously someone's going to come. Like, I'm going so slow, but everyone is going slow. And sometimes when we zoom in on ourselves, we think we're the only ones suffering and going this slow. But I realized that as long as you're moving forward, you're moving at the same pace as probably everyone behind you.
Totally.
That is like the biggest life lesson to take from any of this, right? Like, you think you're the only one that's sucking, you know? Everyone else is crushing it, and I'm sucking.
I can't relate to that more because that was my exact feeling I was probably where you were on course last year. I was like, why am I not getting past right now? Where are the people, like, that, the last, like, uphill and then descent is just misery if your feet and ankles aren't feeling good. Cause
that Rudy, my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I mean, it's a good lesson learned. And I think with UTMB, like, obviously the sport is getting faster. It's getting more competitive, all of the above. But there's something to be said about UTMB. It's like muscling through these mountains and getting it done. And I think you have a phrase that I really like. It's like not happening to you. It's happening like for you.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that because it kind of gives you this perspective of like taking in what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's benefiting you. You know, it's not against you. The world's not conspiring against you. It's like, let's see what we can do with what we've got.
Totally.
And I think that's a great perspective in those moments where you feel like you're the only person and you're falling back and people are going to catch you, but it's actually the exact opposite.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
And that's, like, I think something you probably really learned over the years, and you have that kind of in your back pocket, right? Like, you have had this breadth of career that I think few of the women have, right? Like, starting so young. Yeah. And so I do feel like that's just something you learn through a lot of, like, trial and error, you know, like a lot of just realizing at the end of the race when you've done a lot better than you thought you were doing, that you were your own worst enemy out there, you know?
Well, I mean, I actually for Chamonix, my race at TDS that I did in 2017 was probably the first time, and when I do talks to schools and stuff, I talk about this experience, and it's very poignant in my career. Is like, I started the race and was in second, third position. Mimi Kotka won that year, but I had my first gel. It didn't sit well. Then nothing sat. Everything came out. And there's a big climb out of Bourg St. Maurice in TDS. And I was sitting at the checkpoint and I was waiting for my dad to catch me. And I was like, if Dad catches me, then I'm really falling back. You know? And I was like, oh, but that'd be kind of cute. Like, Dad. You know, I was just like, all these narratives. I was like, yeah, I can spin this. This is going to be good.
Finish line photo. The two of us together.
What a cute little family memory. Anyway, I was sitting there and this volunteer was like, you know, out of this checkpoint, you're just going to be hiking. You might as well just, like, walk up the hill and watch the sunset because it's incredible. And then you can either just walk back down, sit at the checkpoint, wait for your dad up there. He was just like, totally was like, you know, this is a shitty experience. Let's make a cool thing about
Bless him.
Anyway, I started walking up and saw people sitting on the side of the trails, just completely KO'd, worked too hard, you know, like blown up a little bit. So I just kept walking. And then as the sun set and I put my head torch on, simplifying the life to just this little bubble of light and being like, okay, just put your left foot into that bubble of light and then put your right foot and then just kind of repeat that. And I looked up and I just saw this, like, snake of head torches in front of me and behind me. But because I suddenly wasn't intimidated by, like, the mountains around me, there wasn't kind of people in my face and, like, cheering, and I felt like I was letting people down, and it just, like, everything became silent and black and just like, okay, Lucy, you have this little patch of light. And I kind of was just like, put your left foot in there, put your right foot in there. And I'd passing some head torches and didn't even really, like, spend a whole lot of energy connecting with these people. I was just like, just keep your head down, keep moving. And, you know, I dropped from third to, I think it was like 47th female. And then by Chamonix, I finished in 5th, and I had no idea.
Oh my God, I just got goosebumps.
Like, it was so crazy because my crew at the time was some Solomon staff, and because they were crewing Mimi as well, and we thought we'd be closer, they were like, we're going to have to leave you. And I was like, leave me. Like, it's better if you just, like...
leave me.
I was, like, reciting the Titanic out there.
My heart will go on.
No, but I kind of said, and it was, like, relieving for them to go. You know, I was like, just let me... I can now
take some pressure off.
Go to the aid stations and pick a sandwich up. It's fine. Yeah. And then when I crossed the finish line, Solomon was still there with Mimi, and they were kind of like, oh, yeah, she's our athlete too. We were totally there for the process. And I was like, this race is never over, you know?
That's so
and
funny.
Just to stick with it. So I think, and for UTMB, it's kind of special because you go into the night first thing, you know, and you go out of Notre Dame de la Gorge where it's just chaos and it's very overstimulating, very overwhelming. And then it's just you and your patch of light. And I think that's what my brain and body needs before sunrise. And then then let's see how the day plays out.
Totally. And I think with UTMB, something you don't think about often is there's a ton of people on the start line, but actually once you get out there, you're running alone for a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I think often you find yourself in this no man's land, no woman's land of sorts. And it's interesting, like you said, to have those strategies in your head. And man, I feel like you have the best mental strategies of anybody I've ever talked to.
You do,
I'm holy crap, Lucy's had this over a decade of experience of just all these mental strategies. I'm I need to file those into my own brain. Gosh. But yeah, I think talking about last year, how, you saw the course, you saw what it entailed. You had a great day out there. Do you have any feelings of how you would approach it different from more of this racing mindset this year now that you've got all the experience under your belt?
Yeah, I think on top of everything that went wrong, body-wise, I was also not fueling super well. And that's been something that it's been this ongoing kind of process for me. And I finally feel like I've got different recipes for plan A through to plan Z out there. And I think that that's going to be the biggest changing factor for me, is that I'm going to be fueling this thing by some form from start gun to finish tape. And I think that's going to, regardless, it's going to make me recover better, but it's going to make me move better. It's going to make me feel better. And so I'm excited to put that into action. As I think everything else is kind of there's a lot out of my control. Totally. But what I pull out of my pack and put into my mouth, very much within my control.
I also love your perspective talking about the first climb out of Les Houches last year, the maturity that you had to be able to say,
I didn't know I had it.
To be able to say that this, because that pace, it's impossible to describe. I try to describe it to people, but it's impossible to describe that early pace of UTMB. Because this is 108 miles, 100 some kilometers, very long.
174.
174 kilometers, it's very long. And that pace feels like a 50K.
Yeah.
And you're either in this mindset of, I'm going to put myself in it and be competitive today, and that you feel like you need to run that pace to be competitive.
Oh,
you have 10,000 people behind you making you run that pace.
Exactly.
Right, you're literally swept along almost.
So it's nearly impossible to not do that.
Yeah.
But to have the wherewithal to tell yourself, hey, this is actually not what I want to be doing right now or should be doing.
Not sustainable.
That's great, because it's very difficult to do.
It is. And, I'm really good friends with Amanda, who obviously I was running along the river with, and she did take off, and I caught her at Notre Dame de la Gorge, climbing up Col de Bonhomme, and, because she ran so hard, her stomach just completely shut down, your body's just freaking out. It's okay, this must be a short effort because we're going pretty hard. So no blood to the stomach, all to the legs. And so what I've learned with nutrition is start early, get it in. It's like putting kindling on a fire. If you stop it, it's just going to burn out. But getting that in, and really you run a minute a K slower. I'm going to talk in kilometers to you.
I get you.
It's 7 minutes, and 7 minutes in a 27-hour race is absolutely nothing for you to feel good and fuel forward.
That's such a good little, once you put it in those terms, you're and it's a hell of a lot faster than sitting on the side of the trail burnt out, right?
Well, I was actually, Ryan, again, was talking about it, because he was Ludo, who finished 5th ultimately last year, I think, didn't pass him till Col de la Seine. So Ryan was in front of him for all that time, and then Ludo ended up putting 6 hours onto Ryan, 4 or 5 hours onto Ryan.
Wow.
In the end. And it was just kind of Ryan was uncomfortable that whole time because he was trying to run this pace that he didn't need to run, and then he ultimately slowed so much that he didn't even get to do the pace he wanted to do. So it's just the give and take and the balance, but it's so hard. And the first couple of hours of UTMB scare me the most. It's not the distance. It's not being up at high altitude. It's the first few
just being swept up in it all.
Yeah, totally. Because there's something to be said about the energy you get from hearing you're in the top 10. Like, you're competitive, you're in it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like, I always think to, like, the last 50K of UTMB, like, there's a lot of runnable stuff in that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much time to, like, move well up into
Yes.
the top 10.
Yeah.
Like, there were some women that were just flying in that that last third last year. And I remember thinking, like, I want to be like them.
Must be nice.
Like, and so I think that strategy that you're talking about, it's almost like throwing the ego out the door a little bit in those early miles and being like, I know I'm exactly where I need to be.
Yeah.
And I think that takes a lot of maturity.
Yeah. And like Koop was really good when I saw Jason Koop at Courmayeur, and he's always said this. He's like, at 50K, wherever you are is good. As long as you get out of that checkpoint, and especially in UTMB, it's so important that you just exit that place of comfort and easy transport and your crew, and you get back out there, because then it becomes you're closer to the finish line than going backwards. So I always have that in my mind of like, wherever I am at that point is good, and then I can start putting the pieces together of what this day is going to look like.
I mean, just thinking about your training block too, like you've put in some pretty big days in the last little while. And so like last time I saw you was in July when we were in South Wales at Love Trails Festival, glamping in a field by a castle. It was great.
Normal.
Doing
Everyone catches up.
runs to the pub every day. It was the whole thing. But it's just been really fun to watch you over the last 6 weeks. Just like you've really just immersed yourself in the mountains, not necessarily in Chamonix, but just in the mountains. And I feel like that's such a healing thing to be out here. And, you know, like a race like UTMB is fun to train for. It's not like a desert race or something that's like, you know, very specific. You can just play. But it just seems like you've been really like, I don't know, at peace and like just like moving and like appreciating what your body can do out here. And that's been like, do you want to kind of talk a little bit about how that's felt putting together like what looks like a really good training block ahead of this?
Yeah, totally. And it's been just super fun. And I've been very intentional about like, I wanted to do one lap of UTMB. I wanted to do usually we run a Solomon camp, and it's a really great opportunity. You're obviously running with some of the best runners in the world, which is group dynamics sometimes, and easy is not someone else's easy. And I always struggled with that, and I'd always get in my own head, you know, when you're
the
running.
whole ego piece again, right?
Yeah. And you're like, you don't want to be the last, you know? And last year I finally was like, you know what, I just got to do my own pace. But it's cool to create those good memories and on the course, and to break it down and to see the course. I think it's good. But I kind of had two big blocks of like big hours. And so I did one around Mont Blanc, and then I actually went to the Pyrenees and did Ultra Pure New course, and just kind of roped together some cool runs out there, which I'd never been. And it was just so cool to kind of like, I just wanted to see different things and play in a different place and not try and like remember or replicate other experiences. It was like fresh canvas, like, and just create some really cool memories. And that way that this whole like lead in has just felt like playful and adventurous. And I felt like a bit of a badass because I've been like on my Strava making routes, and in the Pyrenees there's not water everywhere and refugios, so you got to be smart. And I've kind of just loved having that, like, my body is strong and it can carry me far. I'm confident in my brain and my ability to like make smart decisions. I'm independent. I have this freedom. Like, these are all privileges, and I have time, and what better way to spend it, you know? And so it's been fun. It's been a process. It's been full of ups and downs, and by no means smooth sailing, but I think I'm a better captain because it's been wavy, you know? So it's been, just a really cool, very different, but perfectly imperfect build-up.
Oh my gosh, I love that. No, I really do. And I think there's a lot to be said for the more independent adventures. Yeah. Because at UTMB, obviously, you have the aid stations, you have that support, so that just feels like a bonus. But if you're used to carrying more of your own water and really thinking about your day and your calories and all that, and you're not relying on it.
Totally. That's what I'm thinking. I was like, it was so hot in Spain. It was so rocky that I've come here and I've been like,
it's buffed out.
There's a river, like there's waterfalls. There's like, I can look up. I don't have to be looking at rocks the whole time. You know, it's just, I think there's a lot of power in training in the harsh conditions. And race, you know, sweat now, sweat less later. And me and Abby Hall, we have this kind of, we've been bouncing messages as two independent women doing our own thing together, you know. We send voice messages when we were cutting loops of Mont Blanc and just kind of like the highs and lows of it. But we have this like saying of like, put us in the dark, like let us get to work out of the limelight, out of Chamonix. We don't want to don't speak about us, don't think that we're going to be up there, and then watch us come out in the light. And I think it's going to be pretty special.
Oh, man.
I love that too, because I think you and Abby are both these runners who have been in it for a while. You guys both kind of like love this like nighttime running, exploratory stuff too. And I think you find a lot of power in that too. So I think that's almost like a double entendre with what you're talking about.
She's inspired me to get a bit later. I'm definitely a morning runner. She's another level of it. Runner. I see her 8 p.m. runs and I'm like, dude, I'm getting ready for bed.
Yeah, right?
But yeah.
I know. I think there's something to be said, some advice I give to people when they're running UTMB. Like my husband Mike is running this year, and I said like, take care of yourself and like consider like every moment that you're taking care of yourself like a feather in your cap. And I was like, I want you to have more feathers in your cap than anybody out there. And I think there's a lot of power in that. I think your like solo journeys and adventures that you've gone on are exactly that. Like it's going to encourage you to take care of yourself better than anybody else out there is taking care of themselves. And that's what like 100 miles and 100 some kilometers around Mount Blanc is. It's like just taking care of yourself and fueling and just being smart, resourceful, and controlling all the controllables.
Yeah.
Which is,
Can we talk about Mike not having to carry a camera?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Talk about lightening
He's
the
going to
load.
be so fast.
I've been telling him that all summer, and he's like, I actually do think carrying my camera is heavier than my required gear. So he's like, I am absolutely ready. And he's got like strong triceps from carrying it all summer. So.
Gonna hold that water bottle so good.
we did
He's
say
not letting that go.
We said if he's having a rough day, then maybe I can put the camera in his hand and he can document some of it. But I'm like, let's try to avoid that.
Oh, it'll be all selfies of his face. Yeah, we won't go there.
Let's not manifest that.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. Oh, I'm so excited for you.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I'm excited. I think like it feels like the perfect point in my career, you know, like and just kind of it's been such a like up and down journey with this race and with coming across overseas. Like I always come for 3 months and it's such a big stint and it's, you know, like
leaving your family, your your support
dog,
network,
you know,
especially the dog.
So it's just like, and I don't know if I will do the 3-month thing next year, and so this kind of feels like a little bit of a closing chapter of like, okay, you know, either I'm going to move and move somewhere else, or kind of just change up that routine because it's a load, it's a lot to carry, and it just. Especially it starts to get to the end of the trip now and I'm kind of like you say, you can sniff the end. And again, with Abby, we were like, oh, we're going to, like, she started booking things after UTMB. Like, her and Cordis, her husband, are going to the WNBA and, like, all these cute little things. I have the Nice Ironman World Championships 3 weeks after UTMB, and then I fly home. So I'm, like, booking my bike in to get service. And I was like, like, different worlds.
And then maybe a massage. Live crazy.
Exactly. But, you know, you kind of get to that point and you're just like, oh, you know. But I do love because I board that plane and I get home and like nothing's really changed.
Exactly.
You know, dad's there, dog's there, and life goes on. So there's a beauty in it, but I'm also like, this feels like a little bit of just a new chapter will begin after.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Osprey. I see Osprey everywhere, as I'm sure you do too. Whether it's luggage, kids carriers, or running packs, Osprey is the one-stop shop for adventure. My current favorite for backpacking is the Aura LT50 for lighter weight, multi-day overnight trips where comfort and ventilation are critical. It has an anti-gravity suspension that delivers a weight-defying fit that seamlessly envelopes your back and hips. Talk about comfort. The pack also has easy-to-use side pockets, trekking pole attachment, and integrated rain cover. And it's made with recycled materials. Head over to osprey.com and click on their tool, Pack Finder, to find the perfect pack for you.
Let's talk about the Ironman training and how you're fitting that in the middle of all this. Yes.
It's going to be a really short conversation. Have you seen my Strava? It's just zeroed out.
This is very true. But you know, you
priorities.
Yeah, you know how to swim. You're fine. You don't need to practice it, right?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a nightmare. Like, I didn't bring my bike across. I was meant to borrow someone's bike. Their bike turned out to be broken. And so... Again, it's like I could choose to be upset and frustrated and angry and like trying to, you know, I could probably put more energy into trying to find a solution. But, you know, UTMB I need to make very clear is like numero uno in this thing. The Ironman is a bit of a fun little cherry on the cake. It's a bit of a fun thing for me to do. And I love doing it. And, you know, I was talking to someone the other day about like, there's been like a roller coaster in this build up, but nothing that I'm like leaning on going into it where there's a bit of an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
And last year I had a dodgy Achilles to the point where I was going to go full into Kona Ironman and not start UTMB. Like I was very on the edge of it. And this year there's nothing that I'm like, that I can lean on. You know, I'm like, yeah, it was bumpy, but like, no, everyone had bumps. But last year I had like walls, you know? And with the Ironman, it's kind of like, well, it's going to be comical, the lack of, like, the little bit of training I'm going to squeeze in between UTMB and Ironman. It's going to be some cycling to the bakery and some swimming because it's hot in Spain, you know? Like, it's really not going to be training. And it just means that I can just take that pressure off completely. Yeah. Like, last year I was trying to shift focuses and do both, and, like, you just cannot do both sports justice. It's just not possible. And you're disrespecting both the Ironman by doing it 3 weeks after UTMB, like, you know. But I have faith in that my engine is strong, my mind will be good. Yeah. You'll
be very refreshed, you know?
Like, 10-hour day? Are you kidding me? Lovely. You mean I get to sleep all
night? Party lap.
Done by dinner?
Yeah. I mean, meals? Okay.
That perspective, that helps, right?
Totally.
Like,
yeah. Even when I did Kona last year, you know, I was like, a marathon? Easy.
Cute.
Yeah. And it was like everyone else's attitude around me was like, we've got a marathon to go, you know? And I was like, oh, okay, well, like, you can shift that and really change. And it's a superpower for me because I come from something so extreme that a lesser extreme feels comfortable. Even though I have severe discomfort in both swimming and cycling. So, but yeah, it'll be a fun thing to do. And it's an all women's race, all women's world championships. No one's ever done the two together. Pumped to try.
You're like, it me. I'm so excited. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, competing in an all-women's field, too. Especially, like, compare that to UTMB, where you're, like, surrounded by a lot of dudes for the whole race, and you might see a couple other women.
Yeah.
Very different energy and experience, and even, like, knowing where you're placed in that, and, like, all of it, right?
Yeah, it's just a fun thing, you know, like, UTMB is the Olympics, it feels like the Olympics of trail running.
I tell people it's like the Super Bowl.
Super Bowl, yeah, right? That's a great way to put it. Yeah, and then this is the Ironman World Championship, so they're pinnacle, and so it's just cool to see the professional women at UTMB, the professional women in Ironman, and, like, we're not dissimilar. Like, and especially with how this sport is going, it's just really cool to see those sports exist and stand on their own 2 feet, especially for the women. And that's
You and Heather Jackson are just like a little flip-flop.
I know. We trained together a bit before Black Canyon, and it was so interesting because, you know, she was just, we've done the opposite, and she was doing Western States and I was doing Kona, and it was kind of like, I'll give you my advice if you give me yours.
It's kind of cute. I feel like you're both exploring a whole new world. Like.
Yeah. And she's just a living legend in it. So, you know, it's really cool. People are like, do you know Heather? And I was like, I kind of do.
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Do you find, like, just sort of zooming out to, like, a bigger life perspective, that doing the Ironman and stuff helps you not take the running as seriously? Or, like, what about it helps kind of your attitude as a professional athlete?
Yeah, I think my personality is that I will do a lot of things to the point of, I always thought that I outrun my love of running. You know, I think I should be doing more of it. You see online women and people are training so much, and I think I just, I'm like, okay, this is your job, Lucy, like, more is more. And that's always my attitude and personality trait. And so with the triathlon, it just enables me to, like, do other sports. And these are sports that I have no pressure, no expectations. If I can get through a ride without a flat and mechanical, I'm relieved. If I can do a swim set, I'm just grateful and that I didn't drown and I made it through, you know, I kept up. And the wins are so much larger, you know, in running, they're so marginal. I've been doing this like 12 years now. And so you've got to really look closely to find, like, those successes. Whereas, when you haven't ridden that far to go for a long ride, to swim your longest set, there's, like, wins. And I just think, like, actually I think runners, they love running to the point of, like, they won't do other sports, and then if they get injured, that's their relationship with it. It's like, I swim when I'm injured, I cycle when I'm injured, and I wanted to build that relationship. So, you know, in case something did happen, it was easy. I could be like, well, I do love cycling, and I know how to do this, and I find joy in it, and there's community around it, and so it's just kind of given me arrows into my arrows and
on your quiver?
Quiver.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's like bow? No.
arrows for your bow.
Oh, there we go.
In your quiver. We got this.
I didn't know quiver. It's what the Solomon pole thing's called.
Oh, yeah, totally. No, I love that so much because I feel like, I mean, sometimes being in the world of media and running and stuff like that, you sort of feel like you become quite one-dimensional. Yeah. And like, I love it and it's amazing and we all love it, but also sometimes you want to talk about other things, you want to do other things. But for you, you're still wanting to be like competitive and professional. So it's a nice way of channeling some of that energy, but without burning out, maybe, totally. Right? Like,
yeah, that's exactly it. And I think I'm considered in this sport, you know, I've been in it for 12 years. People kind of expect me to have all the answers. And in triathlon, I'm such a student, you know, like I learned to clip in the last year for this Ironman. I was like,
how do I clip out?
Yeah. I was on my driveway just toppling over. And my neighbor was like, dude, just stick to running. Like, you know, it's real unsafe what you're doing now.
Yeah.
But it's so beautiful to be that again and just to feel like I don't have the answers and I'm not expected to. And I'm an age grouper in triathlon and I'm not a pro. And I'm there for what my dad is at trail races, you know. We just, in and amongst it, see where it shakes out and, like, in it for a good time. And, you know, like, I don't feel like I'm in it for a long time. Like, it's not something that it's too hard to manage them both.
Yeah.
But this is definitely, it's been a cool experience.
Just going to close this.
No, that's amazing to me because I think one of the things that inspires me the most about your career in the sport too, it's like because you've been in it for 12 years, like you've had those moments early on in your career seeing success. You've had the big struggles like in the public's eye, like kind of navigating your love for the sport. And I think a lot of runners, we would have seen them off the scene by now because of those like kind of like struggles and like feelings of, is this still for me? Do I still love it? But you came back. And you came back with, like, even more love for the sport than you had initially. Like, talk a little bit about what that's been like over the years and, you know, what's exciting you the most and, like, where you find your love going these days in running.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's been, I think there was a astronomical rise in success for me. Like, it was a young sport. I was a young Australian. You know, I came to Western States. I led for 100 Ks. I ultimately finished third. I then, you know, had 5th at TDS, won Ultra Trail Cape Town, Ultra Trail Australia, like had 2017, 2018 were just like massive years. And I look at the resume now and I'm like, that's just too much, you know? But like at the time it was, definitely didn't have to dig as deep at races. Like the competition wasn't as much. And, you know, like nowadays I race twice a year now, 2-3 times. And inevitably, you know, I pushed my body, that personality trait we're talking about, more and more. Gets to a certain level. And then, you know, there was the downfall. And I was, you know, in some ways lucky in that it fell, I say lucky with like quotations, around the COVID period. And so world shut down. I was forced to kind of face myself of like, okay, when this starts back up, do you want to start back up with it? Do you want to pivot? Do you want to, like, you can start studying right now. Like, world shut down, might as well do an online degree. Like, you never went to university, so now's your chance. And like, it was kind of like, who is Lucy when she's not running ultras? You know, she's a daughter, a sister, you know, like so many other things. I love nutrition, and that's why I wrote a cookbook, because I wanted to share my passion about that. And it was kind of having that taken away that it was kind of like, I just don't think I'm done. And, you know, I changed coaches, I changed a lot of things about the people around me and where I was putting my energy. And I've always been like present on social media, but I was prolific on social media. And to the point of like, when you open yourself up that much, and of course to that many people, you're going to get negative and positive feedback. And yes, the majority was positive, but as most humans, we focus on those few negatives, and they cut me deep. And so it was kind of like, okay, you've got to change your relationship with this. You've got to put some boundaries in there. And, you know, I really focused on changing those things to set myself up for coming out of lockdown in a really positive way. Then I DNF'd Western States. Like, I went to Western States thinking I'm in such a good place mentally. And I was very similar to your attitude about this year, where you're kind of feeling like you're stepping a bit away from Western States. Yeah. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. And I was the same. I was like, okay, I've come third. I've had a bad year for me. something in the middle, vanilla is almost uneventful.
Yeah.
In the best way.
And I got DNF.
Yeah.
I was like,
wasn't on my bucket list.
Wasn't on my bingo card.
Yeah.
And so I was then just forced, and it was the same thing where it was like, this, I feel like this didn't happen to me, it happened for me, because I had to realize that DNFing's part of this game. Ultimately, like, you know, if you, like, it was kind of like testing my love for it. It was like, okay, you're in a really good mentally place, now we're going to put you in, like, a bad physical place.
Yeah.
And just test that mental strength that you've built up and resilience. And so, again, like, that's when I found triathlon, because I was just looking for something a little bit different, just kind of reshaping sport for me and opening up my horizons on it. And it was through triathlon that I was like, God, running's the best sport. You don't need a goggles, you don't need to find a pool, you don't need a bike, you don't have to do the mechanical stuff. And I then was just like, no, I want to give this one last crack. And when I started working with Koop, I was like, I turned 30 in 3 years. I want to give myself the next 3 years and just see, like, I want to put myself back in it and see where that shakes it out. And regardless, it's going to be a fun journey. Yeah. And I'll just, you know, it's not like, I'd just be glad it happened rather than sad it's over.
Totally. And you started working with Koop just before last year's UTMB, and now you've had a full year of working with him. How has that changed your training? And, like, yeah, what is different coming into this year's UTMB from, like, that coach-athlete relationship that's different from last year?
Yeah, I think just a stronger bond, you know, like, just through him riding the highs and lows. He came to Black Canyon, he watched me suffer, remarkably suffer. He rode the highs of having a great Ultra Trail Australia where we finally got, like, the nutrition element sorted. That was the failure at Black Canyon. And then, you know, he's had to endure my want to do triathlon. Reluctantly, he puts in a few swims and rides. It's not his favorite thing to do. It's not what he wants, but he knows it's what makes me happy. So we've got a relationship on that.
You understand each other.
Yeah, we understand. Yeah. You know, we keep space on that stuff.
I can feel him rolling his eyes as he's programming.
And yeah, so we're back in Chamonix, and I have a meeting with him tomorrow, just like we did last year, the Wednesday before the race. And it is now just like, he knows me and how I function. And I think what he realizes is people that know Koop knows that sometimes, you know, like, the emotional side is, he's book savvy. He's super science driven, very smart. And I'm showing him all the emotions, you know? I'm like, you let me show you how chaotic someone's like.
You got me and my feels.
You know? And so I think
I've got it all.
Yeah.
This is good for him. This is good.
I think so. And I think, you know, I talked to, like, Katie Shad and Abby Hall, other athletes of his, and it's cool because I think that you like, book smart's great, but we're not robots, and you know, we feel differently, and I care so deeply, and it's sometimes it's my strength and my superpower, but it's also the thing that can undo me really quickly. And so he knows how to kind of now navigate that. Whereas, you know, after Black Canyon, we're still pretty early in the relationship, and he was like, all right, well, that's a shame. And I was like, so I'm not going to Western States. I just trained super hard for this race. I actually had a worse race than, like, you know, it was like,
we went backwards, not forwards.
Yeah,
like,
I'm not good at this thing anymore. Like, the sport is just beyond me. And, you know, when he took me on, he said something which I still think about, of, like, he's like, we can build you back up to that, like, fitness that you had when you were doing really, really well, but the sport has progressed. And whether you can, you know, and it's just kind of like understanding that this sport is wild, and it's getting faster, and it's getting more professional, and everyone's looking for 1%ers, and it's just like, and
the women's race, man.
Yeah. And it's just kind of like, my willingness to give is not, like, ceilinged, but it's kind of like, I got other things I love and enjoy, and I'm just like, I don't know if I'm going to sell my soul to stand atop a podium anymore, like I did in 2018, because I know what can come after, and I'm very protective of never putting myself in that position again. Yeah.
I love that perspective, too, because I think we hear a lot about the, like, going all in these days, and
well, it's totally glorified.
Yeah, and you see
and you have to, really, to be at the
you
top.
look at, like, the top of Western States this year, and it's like a lot of people who've gone all in, and it's amazing, and, like, we're seeing performances unlike anything before. But I love that perspective because, like, I'm of a similar mindset of, like, you can still do well in the sport and perform well and have fun in it when like, you don't go entirely all in.
Yeah.
And I love hearing you say that. And I love hearing about the balance that you have with a lot of aspects of your life, and hearing you list off the things that you are, and a runner isn't necessarily the first thing on that list. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I just think on my tombstone when I die, they're not going to have my Western States finish time. No, like, I really hope they're like, she was fun and adventurous and happy, and, that's what I want to put out, and that's what I really like. You were asking, like, what my why is now, and my driving force is, like, I love storytelling, whether it's my story or someone else's. I'm just fascinated. I think Mike does an amazing job through the photography of it. And then, like podcasting, you guys can tell stories, and the stories that stand on the start line or the sidelines of UTMB and races is incredible. But, I'm driven by, like, my own curiosity of myself and my body, but then just, like, the interactions and the things that you go through and the people that you share it with, and that connection and bond that's built is like, yeah, I just don't think I'm done building those yet. I don't think I ever will be, to be honest.
No way.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch a little bit on just like the idea of failure as like a growth tool, because I feel like it's like a pet peeve of mine is that we aren't taught to fail in life. And it's something you learn as an adult through like the horrible experience of failing. But I feel like if we taught kids how to fail and be okay with it, like, everything in life would be so much better.
Yeah.
But I feel like it is something like Black Canyon's a good example of, where you put yourself out there and you have to, but then you also have to be okay with taking that failure and like just like reformatting and like kind of adding that fuel. Do you feel like you've gotten better at that? Do you feel like you have a different approach to that now?
Yeah. I mean, it's cheesy, but, fail, they say, is first attempt in learning, right? Like, that's what it stands for. And I think what I was proud of myself after Black Canyon, which I past Lucy wouldn't have done, is that usually when something hasn't gone well, I just sign up, pivot. I want to go to something else. Like, I want to squash that feeling. Yeah. Like, mask that result by dumping a whole lot of other results on top. And when Black Canyon happened, I just was like, okay, I still ran 100 Ks. I still traveled to America. I still had such an incredible time, like in Tucson, and hanging out with such incredible people. I had Amanda and Abby pacing me, so I just there was so much cool stuff. And I remember sitting on the plane, just feeling like I'm flat because of what happened and how it's shaken out and what it means for my year. But I'm also just like content with that. I'm like, it was what it was. And I don't need to have a next right now. I just need to be like, okay, I'm going to get home. I'm going to take some time. I'm going to think about what really sets my heart on fire and chase that. But I'm going to give myself that time to kind of go through that grieving process, Yeah. And I think just validating that and being like, it's okay to care. And then it's okay to be sad that it doesn't go well. And then it's okay to like not have a next and instead just be like, we're in the Solomon house now, and everyone's like, so what's after UTMB for you? And I'm like,
isn't that enough?
Doesn't the world explode after this thing? It's not the end. And it's just kind of like, or they're like, what's next year? And I was like, dude, man, 2024 is like not even close to being done, like, let me just sit in this. And so I think that that's kind of like really important. And, I actually think kids do such an incredible job because they're not afraid of the repercussion of something not working out. They'll fall over, they'll scrape their knee, they'll have a cry, and then they get back up and they'll run off. And like, I think that that's something that I want to take that kind of approach to it of just like, oh yeah, okay, it was a nick on the knee, and now I'm just gonna get up, put a Band-Aid on it, think about it, be a little cautious for a little bit, and then full send. Because what have we really got to lose?
Yeah, and it's so true. I mean, I think of all the races I'm at, I'm photographing, and then someone's like, oh, who won this race? And sometimes I'm like, I couldn't tell you. Like, it's terrible. But like, I always think about that because I'm like, that's how quick these moments pass. Yeah. And like, they're important and we work for them, especially if you have sponsors and it's a career, like it's very important. But like, also, like you said, life is about so much more. And it's just one little like kind of milestone. Like I did that, but then the goalpost is going to change once you achieve it. Like even if you won UTMB, then you'd be like, okay, well, what do I tackle next?
Now
right?
I got to double up with something.
Yeah. Now I got to run it backwards and then start the race and run it back. Like that's just human nature. We're always one-upping ourselves. So whatever it is, you're never going to reach it. And it's like,
well, when I came third at Western States, everyone was like, your life is like never going to be the same. And I was like, dude, my life has not changed a smidge. You know, like, you think this is going to be the ultimate. And it's the same thing with like so many things in life. We think when we get this job, when we get this pay rise, when we buy this house, when we have the kid, obviously I haven't experienced any of those things, but
same.
I haven't even got a tent, but it's just like, then I'll be content, then I'll be happy, then I'll have made it, and you're just never going to. And it's a beautiful thing to have that drive to keep moving those goalposts, to push yourself to achieve more. But I think what we've got to learn in this sport, and I think the Courtney's and what she's achieving and what Katie's striving to achieve or Jim's trying to achieve or whatever, it takes away the fact that like you spend so much emotional energy preparing and standing on that start line. Whether you get to that finish line, whether you're the first to that finish line, is actually irrelevant, because the toll on the body and the mind and the human spirit is greater than the distance that you're going to run. And I think that we send that all the minute that song is played in Chamonix, you know, like that's for me the most emotional.
Oh yeah,
totally.
Cheers, cheers, everything. So yeah, I think that it's an interesting thing, learning to fail and being almost proud of it. And then I think it's so important that we share it. Like if we're gonna share everything on social media these days, then I hope to see some reports of like, you don't have to justify it. Just own it. Like, you know, and that's what I had to do at Black Canyon, was like, well, that nutrition plan that I was trying with the feed that I'm now sponsored by, didn't work. And that's okay, you know, and it means that when it does work, everyone's more invested and excited, because they're like, oh, wow, well, she didn't get the first time, but she got the second time.
Yeah, and she was honest about it.
And and that's cool.
I think like I love following you on Instagram and social media because you're honest, and it's just, like, I hate that we're not, and I hate that it's human nature to not want to be honest, and it's hard.
Yeah.
But man, is it refreshing, and just like, sometimes you're just like, thank you. Like, you know?
Because it's relatable, and more people see that, and they want to do the same. They want to be equally as honest then when they're like, I don't need to mask this result with an excuse as to like X, Y, and Z. That just like wasn't my day.
Totally.
And it's okay to not have that day.
Yeah.
It's normal. It's a very normal thing.
Well, and if we talk about removing like barriers to entry for a sport and for women and stuff, I think you being honest and sharing your whole experience is way more likely to inspire someone to sign up for something than you just being like, oh yeah, I won another race and that was easy and whatever.
Yeah,
you know, like everyone's like, love that for you. That won't be my experience, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's, you know, it's been cool, and I'm very inspiring for like watching my dad kind of go through his like process of aging and his goals changing, and just kind of like the imperfectness of it, and like his resilience and mindset about finding their success and joys in everything. And like Western States for him, when he ultimately didn't finish, or he's 2 minutes over the finish time. He finished, sorry, 2 minutes over the finish time. You know, seeing him kind of like, and especially for a man, I feel like there's just, we speak a lot about how women are on the back foot, but I think for a guy to really own like a really emotional, traumatic thing that he had to endure, and publicly because of me. Sorry, Dad. Yeah. Thanks for the Solomon TV news. I think he's taught me a lot about how to do that. Even when he's 62, he's still learning, and he had to do it in a public way, and he did it like a boss. And I'm just like, well, if he can do it, and he didn't really want to be doing it, I've chosen this, and I'm choosing how to word things, how to put things out, and trying to do it as honestly and vulnerably as possible.
Yeah. I just love you. I think you're an amazing role model. Like everything you've learned in the sport that you're willing to share, that you're willing to just like show people as you go through it. Like, it's really, really cool to see where you are now, and to see like all of this experience over the last 12 years. It's so part of you, you know, like none of it's wasted.
Oh yeah.
And it's all being funneled into just like where you're going and whatever that looks like, right? Like even if that is just getting more perspective on what you want, that's like, you've learned that by kind of going through these periods of full obsession, and then, balance and finding that.
Whoa,
I know. Yeah.
No, it's been cool. And like, I share the way I do because I'm like, if my message stops, maybe just make someone pause and just think about like, every decision has a reaction, and there's consequences to everything we do, good or bad. And so it's just like, when you go all in, you commit to potentially tipping over the edge. You walk a fine line. When you choose to be a professional sport, you put your body and your mind. When you go on social media, you're opening yourself up. Like, these are all decisions I make consciously every day.
Yeah.
And it's just like, do those things, but do them very consciously and be very aware of, like, yep, you're putting yourself out there. Yep, you're putting yourself out there on start line, online, whatever. And that is it's uncomfortable, but it's also, like, powerful. And if you step into that power and you do it really authentically, then you have done it well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all that I can ask for people. And that's what I hope to put out to see reciprocated. Yeah. But I think you guys do it also very well, I want to say.
So well said.
Just to kind of, like, no, I mean, you know, I'm just, like, so stoked to be on this podcast. And, like, you know, Leah, I mean, I'm so gutted you're not running UTMB, because I was specifically told to pace off you. I've had so many, my nutritionist Meredith was like, is Leah running? Because you should really just surround yourself with her.
Is Meredith your nutritionist?
She is.
I love that.
Yeah, I just started working with her
sweet.
after Black Canyon.
Amazing.
There's no coincidence that things have finally started working.
Yeah, side note, very good person to have in your corner.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, you know, for what you guys are doing for sport and women, and just, like, that pendulum swing is just, like, it feels like momentum for us at the front, you know? Like, I feel like, yeah, talking to other women in the Solomon House and online, it's just been like, yeah, I feel like maybe we have 10,000 people running behind us to push us through that start, but we also have this just wave and energy of support that is, like, will hit us up on the coals in the Col de Bonhomme where no one is, just knowing that, like, this sport's shifting, and it's shifting in a fucking cool way.
Yeah. We're doing a whole, like, women's watch party at the finish line of UTMB on Saturday night to just, like, be there for all you guys coming in. And yeah, it just, to me, that is, like, the biggest thing that you can pass on to future generations. Like, I know none of us really grew up with these role models in the sport. I didn't even know the sport existed or was possible. And I just want to, like, show the next generation and have that show of force, you know?
Oh,
like,
so
we're
beautiful.
here and we're badass, and the women's race is definitely the most exciting race. Like, even for this year,
hundreds of role models out there.
Yes.
Like, Lucy, you're at the top of that list.
Yes,
honestly.
you really are.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Okay, one last question to sort of wrap things up. Do you have a mantra going into this year's race? I know Leah can't remember what you said last year's was. We were looking up your mantra from last year. Do you remember what your mantra was from last year?
Oh my God.
Something about being calm,
confident, and curious.
Yes.
It was the 3 C's. I wasn't running CCC, but it was my 3 C's.
Yeah.
And this year it's stay in it. It's something that I've been saying to myself of just, like, just stay in it. Just stay in the now. Don't worry about the future. Just stay in the race. Stay with
left foot, right foot in your tunnel.
Nibble, sip, left foot, right foot, move through it. But yeah, I'm just kind of like, I nearly got it tattooed on me. That's how much I was like,
that would be a great tattoo. That is a good one.
Yeah, just something that I was like, I just keep saying it to myself. It's just, even running with, like, the guys, you know, sometimes on a climb, I'll be like, just stay in it for a little bit longer. Just sit on their heels a little bit more, you know? And just be a pain in the ass. Just that.
No, it's so true. And, like, I think that is advice that, like, I've been trying to tell myself as I've been racing the last year, because, like, it's easy to kind of get content with where you're at in a race.
That's exactly
and it's easy to get comfortable and, like, not want to suffer that little bit more to, like, be truly competitive in it.
And I feel like that in it is, like, you know, neck deep in it. Like, I'm not, like, dip your toe in. I'm like, get in.
Get in it. And, like, see how it goes. Yeah. Because I think it's kind of scary sometimes to, like,
it is.
get in it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you kind of avoid getting it because you're like, that's scary.
That looks painful.
I'm right back here. So I really love that. And I'm excited to watch you say it this weekend.
Thank you.
I think it's going to be an incredible women's race. Yeah. And, like, no doubt that you're gonna be in that mix.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. I'm just honored to be on that start line with these women and supported by so many women around. I think this whole Chamonix circus is just full of, you know, the creme de la creme.
Yeah.
It's just, what a beautiful thing to be an ingredient of it.
Yeah. Aw, I love that. Well, thanks for sharing your time with us today. I know this week is a big one, but we feel very honored to have you on the podcast.
You got me out of the community run, so I'm pretty stoked.
We just need to get you very sneakily back to where you belong. Just put, like, your sunglasses on, your hat down.
Yeah. I totally did that run, guys.
Yeah. Oh, that was tough, eh?
Well, thanks, friend.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you. We're excited to watch you out there.
Thank you. I can't wait.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Trail Network podcast. Again, we're your hosts, Hilary Yang and Leah Yingling, and we hope you enjoyed it. If you can, we'd love to hear from you. So you can find us on Instagram at the Trail Network Pod. Leave us a comment, let us know what you thought of the episode. We just want all your feedback. We really appreciate it. It means a lot to us. You can listen to the episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. Again, all that really helps. But thank you so much for your support, and we will see you guys again soon.